Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Where can you turn if you think you've been abducted by aliens? Does hypnotism render reliable results? What is the disclosure movement?
Greetings and welcome to the 855th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and those spacey questions came from my co-host, partner in paranormal adventures, and dad, Paul. And today, we bring you a guest who was last with us around 11 years ago. We welcome your calls today. The number is 401-766-1240. That is from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for those of us that are a little too phone shy, I suppose.
Okay. Nadine Lalich began, coming to us via Skype today, I should say, Nadine Lalich began UFO studies in 2004 to investigate her own traumatic abduction experience that occurred on June 15, 1991. A retired paralegal, Nadine has also researched areas related to psychology and spiritual development. She is the author of Evolution, Coming to Terms with the ET Presence, and Alien Experiences, 25 Cases of Close Encounter Never Before Revealed, co-authored by psychotherapist Barbara Lamb. She has also written a children's book, Finding Happiness, a Magical Tale about the Power of Positive Thinking. I think everybody should read that today, not just kids.
Yeah, right?
Nadine appeared in the New Paradigm Films documentary The Day Before Disclosure, Discovery Channel's Best Evidence Alien Abduction, and Discovery Health Channel's Alternatives to Healing. She has been a guest on numerous radio shows, a featured speaker for MUFON chapters, the Los Angeles Paranormal Society, and UFO Con. Her articles appear regularly in JAR Magazine, Journal of Abduction Research. Her website, alienexperiences.com.
So, Nadine Lalich, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here again.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. So I guess we don't pull any punches here. We hop straight into the meat and potatoes. So the origins of your UFO research were on a camping trip in a remote forest in Arizona. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Or a lot about it, actually.
Or a lot about it. 25 words or less.
Well, I'll try to encapsulate it here. Traveled from California with a friend. We were going to do some hiking in the Sedona vortexes. And we stopped about 20 miles north of Sedona. It was late at night, about 10 o'clock, and we decided we would pull over into a day picnic area. So we did just that. It was a very remote area. We were coming down through the switchbacks. There was no one else in the park. It was probably a dozen parking spots. All that was there, it was very rustic. There was no electricity. All that was there was, I think there was some water. There was an outhouse. There was a picnic table with a place to build a fire at each one of these little parking areas. Went to sleep, and what we had done, but prior to that, is we took everything out of the van. We put it all outside on the picnic table. We laid sleeping bags down in the back. Went to sleep probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and about an hour and a half later, I woke to sounds outside the van. I was concerned because we're two women alone in this remote area, so I sat up and I was straining to listen, and I thought it was just footsteps, people walking around the van. After setting up for a minute or two, the back door opened up. Now, all the doors had been locked, certainly. The back door of the van swung open, the lights came on, blinded my eyes, and my first recollection of what I see is a hand coming towards me with 3 fingers and a thumb, gray, pasty white. I got such a good close look at it. I'd already been sitting up. I was wide awake. I could even see little indentations in the tips of the fingers. And that was my first conscious, fully awake introduction to the phenomenon of alien abduction.
Ben, you have another question here?
I do.
Yeah.
So your experiences continued for years, and this led to be involved by the military. How did that kind of get going?
Well, that came in later after I started talking publicly. It was somewhere around 2010, and I woke one night in my room, and there was someone in the room. My dog Annie was awake, and she was whining, and there was someone standing in my room. Now, I think what happened here is that after the initial experience in 91, I sat on this for a long time, and I used journaling, because writing is my favorite thing to do. And I used journaling. So I had dozens and dozens of journals over the years because it became very prolific through different periods of my life. I came in 2004. I'd sort of had enough, decided to investigate, and met Barbara Lamb. We did some work together, produced a book. Then probably around 2007, 2008, I started speaking in public. Now, until that time, I was not aware of anything related to military. What I think happened is that, and I think it may happen to a number of contactees, abductees, whatever term you want to use, I think I drew attention to myself speaking at the public level. So it was around 2009, 2010 when I had this first experience of waking up. And let me point out that it's very, very different. When you have these paranormal ET contacts, as opposed to dealing with what appears to be military, it's totally, completely different. The way they take you, the procedures, everything's very, very different. On this first occasion, someone was in my room. I could not get up off the bed. I was able to raise my head. I saw someone standing in the shadows. I saw someone outside the hallway. I always sleep with my doors locked, my bedroom door locked. The hallway light was on, and there was someone else standing in the hallway, and I could hear them whispering. That's a very big difference right there, because what you're talking about with when it appears that human military are involved, everything is audio. There's no telepathy. There's no strange lights or going through walls. You literally get taken, walked out, put onto a helicopter. So it's a very different dynamic. But I think, and ultimately, I think I just drew attention to myself by speaking so much in public.
Now, I believe you were regressed by a hypnotherapist. Is that correct?
Yes. What happened is that, and there's a debate about whether or not, and I think you mentioned at the beginning of this, the big question is, what is more valid? Is a conscious recollection more valid, or is a hypnotic regression more valid? In my particular opinion, I think they're both valid. I think you use whatever tools you have available to try to discern this very bizarre arena. So most of my memories, the vast majority, and there's a tremendous amount of material. That's why I just finally had to do this second book. Most of it's conscious, 95, 96% conscious. I did, on a number of occasions, maybe 6 different times, 6 or 7 times, I did regressions to several of the events. Most of those were with Barbara Lamb. I did one with another gal, and nothing contradicted, which I found was interesting, because I think when it came to hypnosis, now the human mind is such a it's such a tenuous area, because there's so many factors come into play the way we record memory, and I've always been fascinated with the brain, how we store information. I'm interested in accelerated learning, and so you cannot look at any of this, in my opinion, from my experience and research, is that you can't look at it as 100%. This is an experience that takes place in the gray, and I think the word paranormal is very astute at describing that. So I did have some, and the one thing I can say is it didn't conjure up anything that was out of the ordinary from my conscious memory. What it did do is it enhanced, it filled in some places. For example, the first experience when we were in that camping area is I had some pieces. I remember standing at the back of the van. I remember moving through the woods, very clear recollections, but then there were some blank places. That is one of the times years later that we did indeed, Barbara Lamb and I did a regression on that one. I also did one with a gal in Santa Fe, New Mexico. and it appeared that I had been on a craft, and it included that examination. But nothing contradicted my conscious memories when I have done those regressions.
Do you remember how you felt when aboard the craft? Was there any communication with the occupants, and did you learn anything about them?
Well, there's a lot of communication that transpires, but I have had very few instances, a lot of experiences over decades, but I've had very few experiences where it's an ongoing interaction. You might get some response, a little bit of a response, often no response. Of course, when you're dealing with the phenomenon of ET contact, you're dealing always with telepathy. You're not dealing with any kind of vocal communication. So always initially, for many, many years, for most of the experience, there's tremendous fear when it begins. And it begins in different ways. It's not always a physical abduction. Those are in the smaller percentage. Some of the others appear to be an astral experience. Some involve lucid dreaming. So there's different ways that these contacts happen. Generally, the physical ones, there's a lot of fear initially, a lot of adrenaline, and then afterwards, as it's ongoing, they always have some means of subduing you, subduing your emotions. Being on what appeared to be a craft has happened a number of times to me. I've observed different species. I've observed different kinds of technology that they put in front of me that appeared to be for training, testing. I've seen different methods that looked like they were actually controlling the craft, ways that they control the craft. I've seen on being transferred from a helicopter onto a craft, I've seen apparently ETs and what looked like human military on a craft like that, a UFO craft, working together. So I've observed a lot.
During the course of your life, whether before or after the initial abduction experience in 1991, have you had other paranormal experiences that might seem unrelated to the alien scenario? Ghosts, cryptids, things of that kind.
The whole gambit.
The whole thing.
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
because that's our special area of study.
Yes.
We think they all are related.
Yes, I agree with you.
So please tell us about that, if you could.
Well, all right. For example, when I was growing up, now if we look at everything is connected. That's my belief system.
Ours too.
I think we're all connected.
Yes.
Okay, everything is connected. These experiences have some thread that brings them all together. So, and if I was to do another book, I would do it leaning towards the paranormal aspect, honestly. So, if we look at when I was a child growing up, there were a lot of strange things that happened in the house. For example, and I would say this happened in the early years, maybe the first 10, 12 years of my life. We lived in a small town in Michigan, southern Michigan, and we saw an apparition in the house. It was a regular thing that we saw. Now, there was just 4 of us in the family. I had an older brother, 5 years older. But this apparition was something you saw with your eyes. This was not something that, it was imaginary. This is always in a fully waking condition. And what would happen is that you'd be in a room and you would have a sensation that you were being watched. And you would turn and there would this thing be. And it would be, the way that it looked like it would be perhaps 3 feet tall, 24 inches, 30 inches wide. Imagine it as a cloud almost, fairly thick-looking cloud. And you felt something intelligent staring at you. You would turn and you would look at it, and it would stay motionless, just hovering in the air like that. And then it would move. And when it moved, it dissipated very quickly. It moved very fast, and as it moved, it would dissipate into nothing and be gone. Now, I saw that alone on numerous occasions. My brother saw it. My brother and I saw it together. The whole family saw it together. My mother and I were in a room once. She was vacuuming in my bedroom behind me, and she turned the vacuum off. And, it was some strange stuff. And she said, "What is that behind you?" And I turned, and there it is, behind me. We also had a strange audio kinds of phenomena take place in the house. Lights in the house, some strange lights, some very strange lights that almost could be akin to some of the things you see described in E.T. abductions where they see the lights outside. And I've had a number of experiences that I related more to the E.T. phenomenon where there was like an explosion outside of my window. I had one occasion, and this would have been, I was living in Laguna Woods, California, and this would have been maybe 2008, something like that, brushing my teeth, getting ready to go to bed, and there's a big flash of light outside my bedroom window. Then I'm startled by it. I'm standing up, toothbrush in hand, and it comes into the window. And it kind of explodes right in front of me into a shaft of light that goes kind of upward to the ceiling and has little blue sparkles in it. And my reaction was very bizarre. I had a dog at the time, Murphy, and he was sitting on the bed, and I just jumped in the bed and pulled covers over my head. Very strange reaction. But that was kind of similar to some of the things that we saw growing up.
Yeah.
Interesting. I always think it's sort of the same thing happens in sort of the general paranormal field where everyone kind of hyper focuses on the phenomena itself, but not so much the experiencer. Now I think that's changing over time, slowly but surely. But I think really one of the things that I find most fascinating is sort of the psychological effects afterwards. Right? How does one adjust to daily life after you're abducted or you deal with this daily? Now how have you sort of adjusted? How has this affected you?
Well, this is many years later. Obviously, I've had many years to process this, and 2 books out. I've gone through everything in great detail that I've personally experienced. I also, early on, I made a point. In the early years of exploring this phenomenon, I made a point of making sure all of my diaries had been transcribed, all of my memories, all of the drawings, before I perused any other information from other experiences. I didn't want to tarnish my own personal experience. But in answer to your question, how did it affect me? I think in some ways I found the paranormal a little easier than I did the ET. Back to the paranormal for a moment. We got a Ouija board, and I'm sure you're very familiar with that. And there's a lot of negative connotation about that. Got a Ouija board when I was 16 for Christmas. My brother was going to leave, and he was going to Vietnam. He had been drafted, and this would have been December of December of '67. We got the Ouija board, we took it out, and we began to play with the Ouija board. I had no prior experience with it, but the Ouija board was very strange. Now, we were all a little on edge because Frankie was going off to the Vietnam War. He was leaving in a couple of days. And the board went crazy. And the board we had great difficulty playing with this board, and the board, it's a very interesting experience, the Ouija board, and you're not pushing this thing. It's picking the vibrations from the people whose hands are on it, and it does its own thing, and it kept spelling out, remove the pin, and if you know how a Ouija board has a little plastic center, and then it has a little copper or silver pin in the center, and it kept saying, move the pin, and why remove the pin? It said because it meant death to my brother. Bury the pin in the yard. It means death to my brother. Well, it was pretty spooky. We didn't like it. We were very uncomfortable. But my brother did go to Vietnam, and he was critically wounded. He did not die, but he was indeed 100% disabled with head injuries and body injuries. So I think the paranormal in general was easier for me to process. The other was more, when it came to the ET, actual contact. That expands your worldview in a different way. I think paranormal for me is more akin to a spiritual awakening, interdimensional kind of thing. But with the ET phenomenon, what happened, of course, is you're kind of being victimized because nobody asked you. And so that was a harder, much more difficult physical reality in my now. And that took years to process before I could even come out and start to talk about it. I was very apprehensive. Now, of course, I've spent so many years at this stage of my life exploring so many things. I don't have a lot of fear of much of anything anymore, though, actually.
Yeah, I think you and I are roughly the same vintage, and
yes.
I have to agree. Now, Nadine, I want to get into consciousness and spirituality as we go and its relationship to all this, but we have a question from a listener. We have a very faithful listener in Bogota, Colombia, who always sends in excellent questions, and he has several for you.
Oh, yes. Peter writes to us. The first question of the three, please ask Nadine, what names do aliens use for themselves? Greys, Nordics are our expressions, but what do they use?
Well, in my experience, I've never heard, seen, experienced telepathy where they mentioned their own a description of themselves. I've never seen anything like that. The only time that I ever got a name was when I was presented with an alleged a hybrid daughter who was looked to be about 22 years old. This happened on what looked like a craft, and she was presented to me. And that is the only time a name was ever presented to me to identify any kind of non-human being, entity. And it was Chutka. Take it for what you will.
Sounds Inuit. Almost.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
That was, yeah. But otherwise, no, nobody referred to their species. I've never seen anything like that.
We tend to anthropomorphize all these things.
Yeah.
We do.
You know.
We do. It's true.
Oh, go ahead, Ben. Number two.
So Peter's second question is, what exactly is the design of the military insignia seen in MI Labs, and is there a name to go with it?
Yes. Now that was certainly an area that I researched, because in several experiences, it was very clear to me the insignia and the uniforms. I did research them, and I did indeed break them down into two different departments within the U.S. government, within the military complex. But I choose not to share that, to discuss those departments. I want to pose a very non-threatening stance. I don't care to go into that. Quite frankly, I'd be, at this stage of my life, I don't want any kind of issues or problems. I'm more concerned with the way humans deal with this than I am extraterrestrials. So, yes, indeed, I was able to identify two very distinct departments, and I was able to very clearly identify the patches and the uniforms, but I keep that private.
Okay, probably very sensible.
Yeah.
Well, we can take our break a little early, huh?
Oh, sure thing.
Okay, before we get to question number 3. All right, we're going to take our break. It is Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. With our amazing guest today, Nadine Lalich. We will be right back, so stick with us.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to The Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. It's WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM. And we're having a great discussion today with Nadine Lalich, first time back on the show in 11 years. And Nadine, we have a third question from Peter in Bogota, Colombia.
Yes, and Peter writes to us, what part of abductions is still a mystery to you personally, or do you have all the answers?
Oh, God.
A little loaded question. I've never heard of it.
I'm sorry. No, I don't have all the answers. I don't ever think we will have all the answers. I mean, we are indeed dealing with advanced, everything from advanced consciousness, expanded consciousness, advanced technology. I think, first of all, let me say, I don't think I need to know it all. I don't think I have to have an answer per se. I don't think that's really possible in our current state of evolution, the human species. It's very difficult to comprehend things that are so far beyond the human experience. But what I do think is I kind of live my life in the gray, and I continue to revise a hypothesis of what I believe may be going on. Nothing has to be set in stone or concrete. If you do that, when you lock in, you lock out. And I don't want to do that. I stay free-flowing. I continue to research, bring new information in. And as we were talking about earlier, interweaving the paranormal in with this. Yes, it's all valid, it's all important and worthy of investigation. So it's an exciting position to be where you flow with something. You stay open to new information. You continue to build this hypothesis. Now, you could ask me now, what is my stand on something today? Where will it be in 5 years? Where was it 5 years ago? Very different. Because that's how we are as humans. We're continually evolving on all these different levels. And if you're really engrossed in study, and I love reading, I love study, I have a wide variety of subjects that I pursue, and it's a very flowing, alive way of approaching this amazing place where we are, multifaceted, multidimensional. So nothing's black and white for me. I'm all right living not knowing everything. I don't want to know everything. It's not necessary. It's impossible. We're all connected to this amazing universal energy that is intelligent and promoted by love and creativity. So I just show up on a daily basis, keep reading, studying, take other people's information in, experiences, and work with my own personal evolution of life, of what it means.
Yeah, I like that. Now, let's get a little deeper here, Nadine, because you're good at that. The idea that nothing is what it appears to be is one of our mottos, and particularly when it comes to the paranormal. Everybody assumes that if the ET thing is, the UFO thing in general is, nuts and bolts craft from other planets, which is entirely plausible. The method of travel may be quantum or multiversal or anything, but still they could be craft from other planets. There's another opinion that these could be time travelers, whatever that means, in a world where everything's, the past and future are simultaneous, at least according to relativity and some of the physicists. So what are we actually, and there are opinions too, and I think this has to be considered, and it's mainly among sort of religious evangelicals or fundamentalists, whatever, that these are quote-unquote demons, all right, just sort of messing with us. And from a certain point of view, we deal with parasites, which I think would create the demons of what folklore would call demons. And the parasitical entities, are very good at mimicking as part of nature. They're mimics in order to find their prey and to pretend to be something else. So I think these are all things that ought to be considered. In your experience with this, what do you think we are actually dealing with, or does it vary? Is it all of the above or some of the above? And what say you?
With regard to the ET phenomenon, I do believe some are actually physical. There are off-planet intelligent entities that come to our planet. I do believe some have actual physical crafts. Some. At the same time, I also believe that we're dealing with we also oftentimes are dealing with interdimensional species, vibrating on a different plane, a different energy that can manifest themselves here. Like we talk about Sasquatch sometimes, and a lot of people believe that they are interdimensional. They can appear and disappear. So I think that's certainly a second real viable possibility. And one of my experiences was interesting because they told me, apparent ETs told me in one instance that they did both. They used physical craft, and they had a way to step into a different dimension and actually stop time. And then they could step in here. So other dimensions may indeed be a doorway here. So I think, I don't think it's black and white, either or. I think some of it is truly a physical phenomenon taking place. I mean, let's face it, there's enough information with everything from radar to ground, surface being contaminated by radiation. There's all kinds of physical stuff. Mm-hmm. And also when you're dealing with the human body, if you have experienced contact with physical, that look like they're physical, you have marks on your body. I've got some scoop marks and triangle pin marks and different marks on my body that have happened that are very bizarre. Now, the third thing is that we live in this huge consciousness, which offers so many different possibilities. And you talk about demons. Now, I don't focus a lot on negativity, all right? One of the things in experiencing the ET phenomenon, and well, even in early on experiencing, I was very involved in metaphysics when I was young, and I wanted to explore, the Ouija board thing, what was happening in other dimensions. That came on very early in my life. When I was in my late teens, I was interested in that. And, but there is a way, when you emanate an energy, a genuine energy of goodwill, something positive, emanate with love, you do offer a certain measure of protection to yourself. A lot of people look at these things and they say demons because they're into religion. Well, I'm, in many ways, you could call me a Christian. I had to learn how to integrate my faith. Now, I wasn't raised in a traditional faith, but I follow certain teachers, like Jesus Christ, the Buddha, and the very important teachers and figures in my life. When it comes to the demons, I think that I look at it more as negative energy.
Yeah.
Okay? The demons are negative energy, and the human interprets it, that's going through it, connecting with that energy the way that you will, the way they're going to interpret it. Do I believe in demons? I don't interpret it that way. That's not to disrespect anybody else's view. Mm-hmm. I don't look at it that way. I see it as negative energy. Everything breaks down to energy for me. I protect myself in my life, the way that I interact with things, by trying to project a core love and goodness and respect. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes all the difference in the world with what you attract. So, in answer to your question, it could be a lot of many things. Yes, I believe some of the contact is with actual physical beings. Yes, I believe that there are interdimensional connections taking place where some of our contacts with intelligence are actually coming through other dimensions. And the other thing is, some of it's just energy that manifests and is attracted to certain people, and we interpret it the way we do.
Yeah, no, I certainly think that's very well put, personally. We talk about the Peter Pan theory. Think happy thoughts. In other words, positive, respectful, all the positive things that cut off the food supply for these theoretical, well, I don't think they're theoretical, these parasites, and that cut off the negative. Keep it positive. Come together with your family.
Well, energy, you're right, because like energy attracts.
Yeah.
It attracts. So depending where your mindset is at, the thoughts that you think creates an actual vibration within your body, within how you pull and attract. So I believe a lot of the people that attract what they interpret as negative entities or demons, I believe a lot of that is because at that particular moment in their life, what they're going through, they're generating something within themselves that makes that attractive, and you bring another energy in. And then you interpret it the way you want to interpret it. If you've got training, I think, both of my parents were Catholics, but they had some challenging experiences with that, both of them. But they both grew up during the Depression. Times were tough. And so I didn't have any formal training. I went seeking on my own. By the time I was 6 years old, I was going with neighbors, going to churches. What was this thing people talked about? And so I didn't have any preconceived ideas put into me, which was wonderful. So I had an opportunity to interpret things in my own way and my own pace.
That actually brings up a really interesting point, and you mentioned this a little earlier, which was sort of you didn't want to tarnish your experience, sort of by getting anything else to kind of color your worldview, and a lot of our theories are sort of examining perspective and how we perceive the experiences in front of us. And you made a very interesting distinction between the sort of perceptions of anything paranormal versus that of ET, whereas spiritual sort of enlightenment, I guess, for lack of better words, in regards to paranormal, and victimization in regards to ET. Now, that's not always the case, I understand. But in this sort of instance, where does this sort of shift in perspective come from? How do we know how to discern between what's victimization and what's spiritualizing?
Well, it also goes back to energy. Now, we are so complex, and we're not generally trained. We're given a set of beliefs as we grow up, however we grow up. We're programmed somehow. But and that can stop a growing mind, an inquisitive mind. When I look at, for me, what has been wonderful is, well, there's two things. Well, first of all, I didn't have a lot of programming about parapsychology, metaphysics, the ET phenomenon at all. But, it's really not such a big question. What feels good? What feels bad? You start to get in touch with yourself as to, you get a sense. Now, I would never have chosen consciously to have ET contact. It was too terrifying. Much of it I interpreted for years and years as a negative experience, and quite frankly, although ultimately I worked with it and it expanded my view of reality, I used it. You take anything that comes your way, however you label it, good, bad, in the gray, whatever it is, you take it and you make a decision that you're going to use it for your good, no matter what it is. There's always something to be derived. And so I've been able to pull that out. No matter what happens, where's the good in this? How can I use this for good? It's how we respond to it, which is vitally important. Not so much what happens, but how we respond to it. Now, truly, I would have preferred not to have the ET contact thing, but that was part of my experience. It is what it is, so I worked with it. I will tell you that now if we go into the paranormal realm and more generalized realm, I have had absolutely phenomenal, beautiful, incredible, transforming spiritual experiences as a result of meditation, different life events. So amazing things have happened in the paranormal world for me that I chose to interpret spiritually, that affected me on a spiritual level. Again, expanding my sense of reality and consciousness. I know we're operating on various planes at the same time. I've had amazing things happen, absolutely amazing. I've had precognitive dreams where I was able to save a woman's life in one experience, and I was working for a law firm in Century City, California, had a dream on a Thursday night and about finding a woman on the freeway and watching her cross the freeway, and she get hit by a car and she's literally beheaded. It was a horrifying dream. The next day leaving work, I always had a very specific route that I took all the time, 100% of the time, and it never involved getting on the freeway. I was always driving a service drive. I got off on the service drive completely unexpectedly. It was probably about 5:30. Didn't know what I was doing. And I pull into it, and there is that same woman from the dream. And she is standing stranded in the center between the two opposing lanes. Same woman. Blonde hair, short curly hair, standing there. I was stunned. And I was able to, through the grace of spirit, I was able to get my car over into the middle lane. What had happened to her is her car had apparently stalled, and she had in her mind she was going to walk across that freeway. Well, I was able to get across and pulled over and hollered at her and able to get her in my car. She didn't speak a word of English, but was able to get her off to safety. So a lot of amazing, amazing things have happened to me in the paranormal realm.
Really? All right. Well, what regarding spirituality, because it's something I wanted to get into in our last few minutes here, our point of view tends to be that a lot of the spirituality maybe that we grew up with or that is around even in the New Age realm today is destructive because it concentrates on the self. And the multiverse, as it were, is full of paradoxes. One of them is you find yourself by forgetting yourself. You accept yourself and then you forget. Whereas a lot of the spirituality, it's all me, rather than us, so to speak. Can you speak a little bit about that in your experience, in your opinion? And does spirituality bring us inward or expand us outward or both or what?
Well, spirituality to me, studying that aspect of that dimension of humanity expands outward to me. Now, does it help me connect and understand who I am? It does initially, but ultimately what it does, it makes me understand that I'm connected to everything. Mm-hmm. Every action that I take affects another living being, affects the planet, affects the energy of the planet. There's nothing I can do that is singular, that is separate from. I've been very, very involved in service work my entire adult life. Whether it's it's been with such a variety. I've had animal rescues. I've worked individual with teenagers coming out of recovery facilities. I've done all kinds of work throughout the years. I spent 5 or 6 years literally down on Skid Row in Los Angeles working with homeless people. So ultimately, it's, yes, I think as you look at the spiritual aspect of your own self, it's important, you must explore, but that ultimately will lead you into a greater connection with everything, and you begin to see the interconnectedness, the wholeness of the system. It's a beautiful system, and that none of us really are an island. We cannot do anything without impacting someone else. So I agree with that. There are certain religious philosophies that, do not promote a positive, rapport with the world, and they're very self-centered. But that's not the position that I take. I think ultimately it opens the door. You start with self, you open the door, and then you see the beautiful, incredible connectedness.
You describe almost the African concept of Ubuntu. The African notion of justice and living in the world and being far more than yourselves. Something we tend to really agree with. Now, before we burn up the rest of the time here, Nadine, tell us about your website, your books, where people can find out more about you.
My website is alienexperiences.com. I have another website because I'm working on some new material. It is not in this arena. And that's hbpublishing.net. And there I have a variety of other works going on. I have 3 books out there now, a 4th one coming out. The first book was Alien Experiences, 25 Cases of Close Encounter. The current one is Evolution, coming to terms with the ET presence. And, of course, I did a children's book, Finding Happiness. They're all on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, audio, ebook, paperback. The next work coming out is going to involve more of what we're talking about, more of a paranormal slant, spiritual slant.
Good. You'll keep us posted on that.
Yeah, for sure.
I will do that.
Ben had a further thought?
I do, and I kind of wanted to bring this up. I've sort of figured out the formula of our show after all these years that we tend to kind of like do all the heavy stuff towards the end unintentionally. So here's a very heavy question to end the note on. So last week we had a really fascinating show with Nigel Watson. We talked about the history of UFOs, and there was this running theme that kind of went through sort of how we viewed the phenomena over time, and it had to do with technology and spirituality, or sort of like how one kind of deals with what we're experiencing through whatever we've sort of experienced, because we don't experience what we don't experience. So in this sort of realm, how do technology and spirituality fit into this equation with ET? Are they? We hear sort of new agey things where they're very spiritual beings, and then we still have the nuts and bolts people that say, oh well, it's all technology. Is there a place that they meet?
In my experience, those entities that I've connected with have not been particularly that I could tell. Doesn't say it doesn't exist, but I have not noted any overt spiritual connection, where a lot of people talk about Nordics, they talk about species that seem more similar to our species, and they talk about spiritual experiences. That's not been my experience.
That's actually
mine has, that has not been my experience. Mine has been more genetic focused, scientific focused, technology focused with the ETs that I encountered, except for one species when I was a child. Other than that, most of it has been not really of an emotional or spiritual sense, particularly emanating from them. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but certainly that I couldn't feel a sense of it during experiences.
We contend that the equation of technology with quote-unquote advancement is a serious mistake. For example, from our own historical experience, what was the most advanced nation technologically in the 1930s? It was Nazi Germany. Now, how did that work out? So I think that I would much rather be in contact with a species that is advanced morally and spiritually than with something with a lot of gadgets. So that we tend to call out anyone who talks about advancement in that sense. We only have a few minutes left, but the disclosure. Our personal opinion is that it is naive to think anything that comes out of the government, any government, is going to be complete or accurate or true in any real sense, because there's always an agenda. And with our particular government, with all the greatest respect to our country, I'm a veteran, certainly, and it's that there are many, many competing agencies. Some have information. A lot of them don't talk to each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What say you on the notion of disclosure? Is it naive, or is it going to happen?
I'm on the same page as you are. Okay, the only disclosure that's going to happen is from the people that are connected to it, experiencing it, and talk about it. Do I think it's going to come from agencies, governments? Absolutely not. I don't. I think it is naive. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see it happening. I don't put any energy into that. I share my experience, strength and hope, if you will, and that's disclosure. I am disclosure. You are disclosure. As individuals, we are disclosure. We're looking for something big, organized from government. It's not going to happen. It can't. There's too many complex agendas going on. I don't see that ever happening. So I agree with you.
Okay. There is one final thought. One of the subtitles of your books, and this will lead into another show, which will not take place in 2031. It'll be
Put it on your
calendar
calendar.
The subtitle refers to the ET presence. What exactly do you mean by that? I mean, can you wave to them at the market, or what do you mean by the ET presence specifically?
The ET presence on our planet in our lives, whether they be walking amongst us, whether they be interdimensional experiences, whether they be physical experiences coming to the planet and leaving, the presence itself of what it is. coming to terms with, for me, is acknowledging that it exists. Not necessarily defining specifically what it is, but acknowledging that it's taking place. Extraterrestrial doesn't necessarily have to mean an alien on another planet. It could mean anything non-human entity that comes from this third dimension.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ben, any final thoughts here?
No, that's actually really interesting because I often say the same thing. I think the terms that we have just aren't good enough, and I think how we sort of talk about this phenomena kind of in general, right? Not just ET or the paranormal. One of the major issues is language, and in any sort of debate or understanding of anything, you have to define your terms. And there's so many conflicting terms and so many sort of ways that people are saying the same things, but, just with different words, that it's getting very confusing. I think it's sort of a unified vocabulary just to be able to begin to describe the indescribable is, I think, sort of square one that we haven't even gotten to yet.
Well, that's it. Well, we're pretty much out of time. Nadine, we'll be in touch off the air because we want to send you some books. And thank you again. Inspiring conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben and Paul. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, folks, let's get to our announcements here. We didn't have time to get to everything we wanted to with Nadine, but we'll have her back soon. As we've been announcing on recent shows, the 2020 Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend has been canceled, unfortunately, but the 55th anniversary of the incident at Exeter will not go unsung on our show on September 6th. The day we would have broadcast from the Exeter Town Hall with a panel of the speakers from the festival in a live audience for the 5th year in a row. We will offer a rebroadcast of last year's panel show from there. And on the panel were Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins, Mac Maloney, Mike Stevens, and many other folks you know from this show. And there you go. Ben, if you want, I don't know if you want to take the next.
Oh yeah, sure. You know me, pressing buttons and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So the following week, September 13th, we'll bring you a very special guest, retired FBI agent Clinton Rand. Sorry, I was thinking Clint Eastwood for whatever reason, but Clinton Rand, who as a Hampton, New Hampshire police sergeant in September 1965, was on duty at the police station. At the police department desk during the incident at Exeter, which involved UFO encounters by several of his officers.
And on the on the day after what would have been the Exeter UFO Festival, September 7th, Labor Day in the U.S., Ben and I will be on the Travel Channel as part of the debut of The Devil's Road, the true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the first in a new series of 2-hour documentaries they're doing, America's True Horror Stories. Anyway, I'm in it as someone who worked with the Warrens, and Ben is there to represent the next generation of researchers, and that'll be on the Travel Channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday, September 7th, 2020.
So we have high hopes that we can be back at the Greater New England UFO Conference in Leominster, Massachusetts. That's on Columbus Day weekend. My dad is scheduled to be the keynote speaker to mark his 50-year work anniversary in paranormal research. A little round of applause from me over here. And there are plans for an online conference if it cannot be held in the usual physical venue, and you can look for Shane there as well.
Okay, yeah, Shane Sirway. We're looking forward in October to the Western Connecticut UFO Conference. Also, I talked to the organizer yesterday, and we've got April 10th and 11th, 2021, Kittery, Maine. The New England Parafest will be back. And we'll be telling you all about that. So we'll kind of run it out of the wire here. What do we have next week, Ben?
So next week we have, that's on August 9th. Wow, we're already in August. My dad and I will do something we haven't done in a long time, and that's take an hour to ourselves to bring you on a journey into something we're especially interested in. In this case, it is, what is eternal life?
Bigger question than a lot of people might realize.
Hey, it's the shorter the sentence, the longer the explanation.
That's right. So we'll leave you today with a concise line from the American poet John Greenleaf Whittier, 19th century. In the field of destiny, we reap what we have sown. All right, so I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.